All right, I have 1 o'clock right on the dot, so I think we will go ahead and get started. Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for joining us for a policy briefing on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Good nutrition is a vital part of child well-being, and SNAP plays a big role in ensuring that struggling families in Iowa and across the U.S. have enough to eat. Some big things that were happening in Congress this spring related to SNAP, and we're really happy to have folks on the line to learn about them. My name is Ann Disher, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Child and Family Policy Center. I would love to give you a quick summary of what we're hoping to do here today. I'm going to briefly walk you through some of the nuts and bolts of SNAP here in Iowa and summarize some potentially big changes to the program that are included in the U.S. House Agriculture Committee's Farm Bill. Then I'm going to turn things over to Mary Nell Tress, the Health Policy Associate here at the Center. Mary Nell will walk you through where the legislation to reauthorize the Farm Bill currently stands in Congress and where Iowa's delegation is on this important issue. After Mary Nell, our Communication Associate Stephen Dykstra is going to walk through some strategies we're recommending to influence Iowa's congressional delegation and through the materials that we're going to be sending out after the webinar to help you do some of that influencing yourself if you are so inclined. Finally, we'll answer any questions that folks have. As a point of housekeeping, right now everyone's lines are muted, and they will remain muted throughout the webinar. But if you have a question, just go ahead and type it into the chat box, which is located at the bottom left of your screen. As I noted in the chat box earlier, we'll be sending out our slides and that set of material I referenced this afternoon, and we're also recording the webinar, and we'll send out the link to that as well. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and I think I'm just going to dive right in. So like many federal initiatives, SNAP is a joint state and federal effort. The federal government pays the full cost of SNAP benefits and splits the administrative costs with the states, which operate the program. We care about SNAP here at the Child and Family Policy Center because it is such an effective anti-hunger program, the most effective really in the nation. It lifts annually about 8 million people, including about 4 million children, out of poverty. And right now, many of the good things that SNAP does for families are at risk because of damaging proposals in that House Agriculture Committee Farm Bill that I referenced earlier. That bill actually passed out of committee last month, I think on the 18th. And so we're talking about, food and nutrition, or nutrition in particular, but of course we're talking about it in the context of the Farm Bill because the Farm Bill is the piece of legislation that governs SNAP. And that bill needs to be reauthorized every 5 years. And the current Farm Bill, which was passed in 2014, expires this year. So that House bill that passed out of committee last month could come to the floor of the U.S. House as soon as this week. And so this feels like a very timely conversation today. So supplemental is in the name of SNAP for a reason. The program is designed to supplement families' food budgets. In Iowa, the monthly benefit for SNAP is just a little over $100 a month per individual. That figure and the maximum benefit individuals can get from SNAP is actually tied to the Department of Agriculture's Thrifty Food Plan, which is a plan designed to provide adequate nutrition at minimal cost. Participants are expected to spend 30% of their net income on food. And so the amount that they get as a benefit is that maximum benefit minus their contribution. When you take that $100 plus and break it down, it actually works out to be about just a little under $4 a day. And that breaks out to be about $1.27 a meal. So this is providing an important supplement, but really for most families it is a supplement to meeting their nutritional needs. SNAP participation actually in Iowa, like elsewhere in the U.S., is falling, and it peaked, of course, during and immediately after the Great Recession, has been falling since then. The chart I have in front of you here, which is from the Department of Human Services here in Iowa, shows monthly SNAP participation. And so the blue line with the dashes is actually the state fiscal year 2017 figures, and you can see a steady decline throughout fiscal year 17. And then the red line is those numbers for fiscal year 2018. And you can see with a couple of exceptions that month to month, every month, the participation is falling. And clearly some of the proposals in the Farm Bill are really intended to reduce participation in SNAP, but I think we want to make sure folks understand that those figures are coming down on their own because, of course, the economy has been improving. So in March, about 350,000 Iowans participated in SNAP. Of those folks, about 29% are in families with members who are elderly or who have disabilities. About 53, so over half, are in working families, so are part of a family where at least one person is in the workforce. And 71% are in families with children. So we can see SNAP really serves a lot of vulnerable folks in our community. And I think we're going to talk a lot today about work because the work conversation is really, I think, a key piece of the proposals in the Ag Bill. And I think we want to be clear with folks that actually most SNAP recipients who can work already do. And I know if you've sat in some of our webinars we've done about Medicaid and other safety net programs, you'll hear the same theme. It's true with SNAP as well. But of course, most of them work in low-wage jobs where pay is low, the benefits are scarce, and the hours can be unpredictable. We've got some data here to just give you a sense of the kind of workers who are participating in SNAP. So these are the top occupations in our state by the share of those workers who are participating in SNAP. So 27% of personal care aides in Iowa participate in SNAP. That's the highest percentage, but it's actually tied with folks who are maids or work in housekeeping services. Again, about 27% of all those workers. About 27% of nursing, psych, and home health aides participate in SNAP. About 26% of cooks, and 25% of food preparation workers. So you can see that these are jobs that are deeply needed in our community. I think we all have an interest, right, in having skilled, caring folks working in our nursing homes, in hospital settings, coming into folks' homes, preparing our food in restaurants, cleaning up after our messes. But, of course, they are jobs where, again, the compensation doesn't necessarily pay a living wage. I think we love SNAP for lots of reasons, and one of them is because SNAP is such an effective form of economic stimulus. It goes in and out of communities, into families, onto their EBT cards and out to the community very quickly. This map shows the actual dollar amount of SNAP benefits. This was from February of this year by Iowa County. And, of course, it really, if you know maps of Iowa, what it largely is, it reflects population, right? There's more money, of course, going into counties where there are more people. But what I want to note here is even if you look at those lighter shades of blue, right, which are in many of our smaller counties in the state, it's a significant amount of funds that become available to local retailers. Even in some of our lowest counties, it's anywhere from $35,000 up to $500,000 a month, which at a time where the ag economy actually has some risks and some weaknesses, really important in all parts of our state. And so those funds that go into SNAP and out into communities, goes to about 2,900 Iowa retailers in every county who participate in SNAP. And about 80% of those benefits are redeemed at grocery stores and super centers. And, of course, those are places where families really have access to a wide range of nutritious food, and those foods can be purchased at, for the most part, fairly reasonable prices. So SNAP is not just good for families, but it's really good for Iowa communities as well. So anyway, that's why we love SNAP. And now I would like to talk to you about the House bill, which is, so we love SNAP, but this is the but part of this conversation. And there's three major elements to the SNAP component of the House Ag Bill. And the first thing that would happen is it would make big cuts in SNAP benefits. It would also enact sweeping, risky new work requirements. And finally, it would impose new state mandates and roll back areas of state flexibility that currently exist. Now I'm going to take each of those and talk about them in a little more depth. First, I want to talk about the benefit cuts and sort of how the bill would do that. The first thing it would do, it would end something called categorical eligibility, and that's a big, nasty old phrase with lots of syllables in it. But basically what it is, it's a state option that Iowa adopted and most other states have adopted. Iowa adopted it in 2010 that allows the state to extend SNAP benefits to working families whose incomes would be just above the regular cutoff. So in Iowa, what that did, it allowed the state to raise eligibility from 130% of the federal poverty level up to 160% of the federal poverty level. So to cover more families and to keep them with some support from SNAP even as they start to climb up the career ladder a bit. So essentially what this repeal would do is reinstate a benefit cliff. And I'm guessing we have folks on the phone who are very familiar with the concept of a cliff in the child care context. What's really a similar situation with SNAP, which is a situation where a family gets a small raise and they lose all their SNAP benefits, leaving them worse off than they would have been without that small raise. The categorical eligibility has allowed the state to kind of smooth that cliff out. So reinstating it would really penalize families' efforts to get back on their feet and to get ahead. Another thing that the bill does is it would end the SNAP LIHEAP link in the application process. And of course, LIHEAP is the Low-Income Heating and Energy Assistance Program. Up until now, low-income households who participate in both programs have been able to use the fact that they get LIHEAP, right, just that they are a participant in LIHEAP, as proof of their utility expenses for SNAP. So it eases paperwork. It makes the application process easier, both for the state and for families. The bill would actually require all households except seniors. They could no longer, the fact that they got LIHEAP would no longer count. They would actually have to go through the process of submitting their utility bills directly to SNAP to determine whether they were eligible. So again, it's a paperwork hurdle that ultimately will reduce participation. And that's the kind of biggest area, the biggest way that it would cut benefits is by instituting harsh work requirements. So this is what it would be. SNAP participants, like working age right participants aged 15 to 50 or 18 to 59, who are not disabled or raising a child under age 6 would have to prove every month that they're working at least 20 hours a week or participating in at least 20 hours per week of a work or job training program or some combination of the two. So families that could not comply with that would face really fairly unforgiving penalties. So let's say they didn't quite get enough hours one month, or they just had a family emergency, their internet access got turned off, whatever it was, like they didn't meet the requirement. They would be the adult, only the adult in the household who didn't comply would be kicked off of the program for 1 year after one incident of not getting that requirement met. They could only reapply if they got a job meeting the requirement or if they got some other kind of exemption like disability. The second time it happened, they would be kicked off for 3 years. So it's a very high stakes, very harsh penalty that the folks would have to meet every month. And that is where the vast bulk of savings would come. It would come from households having their benefits sanctioned because they would not have enough hours. They would have a family disaster. Something would happen and they couldn't get that reporting done. So they're going to save all this money in benefits. What the bill would do is actually turn much of that money that's saved from benefit cuts into new, untested, and kind of huge work requirements. And one thing that would do would require massive new reporting and paperwork systems in each state, right? Because this is administered by states to track thousands of SNAP participants each month. And I think the cautionary tale about this is there was a bill in the Iowa legislature this session that would have instituted work requirements across a variety of safety net programs, including SNAP. DHS estimated that they would have needed 100 new workers to process quarterly SNAP determination. So what this bill would say is people have to go through redetermination every month. So these are not DHS workers who are frontline folks working with families, protecting kids, being in nursing homes. These are paperwork. These are paperwork people, right? Determining whether people have met their work requirements. So the scale of the administration required would be quite amazing. And then, of course, individuals will lose their SNAP if they don't get enough hours at work, if they get sick, or if they have to care for a sick child or lose their job. Those are situations where they would likely lose their SNAP. The other folks who I think would really be at risk is people who would be exempt, right? It's like folks with physical or mental health conditions, but they would be at risk at losing their food assistance if they can't provide, again, that regular documentation that they are exempt. So I think not only would folks who are subject to the requirement lose benefits, but so would people who actually ultimately would be exempt but would struggle to meet the reporting. And then the other piece of it is creating a vast new work program. And our folks at the Center for Budget Policy Priorities in D.C. have estimated that about 3 million underemployed U.S. adults would need slots in a work or job training program in order to keep SNAP. Well, for context, the largest federal job training program in our country trained about 153,000 adults in 2015. So we're talking about a remarkable quick scaling up of work programs. And then, but the problem is, of course, that these slots, that these work programs would be funded at a rate of under $30 per slot per month. I think it is clear that most really high-quality work and job training programs cannot be accomplished at that kind of a rate. So, I think the thing about that $30 a month, and then I'll go on, is that, of course, so then really I think these work programs are really kind of designed to fail because they just can't possibly, provide the kind of job training that would really be needed to move some folks to work. But in the last Farm Bill, part of that Farm Bill was a pilot program. 10 states are piloting innovative SNAP work and job training programs right now. And, of course, it takes a while for them to scale up programs, to gather data, to analyze data. So the results will be available in the next 1 to 2 years, which would give us, I think, a much better sense of the most effective ways to move folks on SNAP into work. So it seems like we're moving a little too soon to implement this right now. And then I guess the other thing to note is that actually most childless adults are already limited to 3 months of SNAP benefits unless they're working or in a job training program. So work requirements are frankly something that we already have to some extent. This would be just a vast scaling up of that. So, I think everyone really agrees. I really don't think there's much disagreement, right, that it's important to help people who can work get good paying jobs. I just think we think there's really no reason to believe that taking away food assistance from folks will help them find a better job or find work faster. And then finally, I guess I would just like to sort of draw attention to the fact that most of these policy changes would really be a step backwards. It would reverse a history of bipartisan efforts in previous farm bills to streamline, modernize the program, and it would reduce the ability of states to tailor programs to local conditions. Like a lot of states can do innovative things, like when Iowa set its categorical eligibility process. They were able to look at other public assistance programs and figure out how to make them work really well together. This bill would take away those opportunities for states. So, on balance, again, I think if you haven't noticed, we're not super big fans of a lot of these proposals. At this point, I would love to turn the conversation over to Mary Nell Traps, and she'll give you a sense of sort of what the legislative state of play is in this issue. Mary Nell, it's all yours.
Thanks, Anne. So to start things off, I wanted to give you a sense of what our timeline is. So as Anne mentioned, farm bills are reauthorized about every 5 years, and the current farm bill expires at the end of September, so about 5 months out. And for any of you on the line who were following CHIP, our Children's Health Insurance Program, was under a similar reauthorization deadline. And that deadline, frankly, came and passed, and it took Congress until well into the new year. They had a September 30th deadline, and it took until January for that program to get reauthorized. And that led to a lot of instability and uncertainty for families and states. So while it might seem like 5 months is a long ways off, I think, as Anne mentioned, it's really timely to have the opportunity to talk with you all now about this important deadline that is looming, because we don't want to put the state of Iowa or its residents in a similar state of limbo. We want to get a new farm bill, a strong bipartisan farm bill, across the finish line before the deadline at the end of September. So now I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about where Iowa's delegation stands, their previous voting history, and issues of concern particular to the Farm Bill. So we'll start off with Representative Steve King. So he does have a history of supporting farm bills. He was a yes vote the last time the Farm Bill was reauthorized back in 2014. And an ag state like Iowa has actually 2 members of our delegation, one in the House and one in the Senate, who are serve on committees with jurisdiction over the Farm Bill. And Representative Steve King is our member on the House Ag Committee. So he is actually the only member of our delegation that is already on record voting in support of the 2018 Farm Bill. He was a yes vote as the bill advanced out of committee last month. However, his focus on the Farm Bill, we are talking to you mostly about the SNAP portion of the Farm Bill, but there are also a lot of other ag provisions included in the Farm Bill. And most of his concerns and his priority areas, they don't really lie within SNAP. They're more in the ag side of it. For example, he was very concerned about this PICA provision that would prevent states, for example, like California, for implementing policies on the cage size or the pen size for livestock in Iowa. And so that was his primary concern. His office is saying that he leans yes on voting on this bill on the floor, but I think he is trying to leverage his position as not a categorical yes to try and get some of his other priorities that really relate to the ag side of the Farm Bill and are outside the scope of what we're talking about today with SNAP. So that is kind of where Steve King stands. Next, I want to talk about 2 of our other representatives who were actually not in office in 2014, the last time the Farm Bill was reauthorized, Representative Rod Blum and Representative David Young. So they do not have a voting history or a track record on the Farm Bill, but neither of them are really calling for cuts to SNAP. So neither of them are really leading the charge saying we need to cut the program, we need to implement harsher work requirements. But in general, they are supportive of work requirements, particularly for the population that we call the able-bodied adults, so those adults of working age. And as Anne walked through, a lot of the work requirements that are newly implemented in this Farm Bill target that exact population, 18 to 59-year-olds, which would be considered able-bodied adults. But as Anne did a great job of explaining, the impact of those harsh work requirements extends well beyond the able-bodied adults. So both Representative Blum and Young are generally supportive of these work requirements, but both of their offices have expressed concerns about what these work requirements would look like in implementation. For example, Representative Blum's office expressed some concerns, as Anne mentioned, the way these new work requirements are implemented, it takes away some of the flexibility that states currently have. So for a state like Iowa that has relatively low unemployment rates, it will be even more challenging to make sure that all of those able-bodied adults have a sufficient opportunity for employment or work training. So there are some opportunities to work with Representative Blum to look at what type of flexibility can we work with as part of this Farm Bill. Anne talked a lot about the administrative burden that these work requirements would place on states, and that is an issue that really seemed to resonate with Representative Young, really concerned about, obviously the state of Iowa is facing budget challenges and a budget shortfall. Our Department of Human Services has absorbed cuts to its programs over the years. So looking at how financially the state would have to take on the burden and all of the additional paperwork and hoops to jump through to implement the work requirements proposed in the House Ag Bill is of concern, I think, to Representative Young, and frankly could also resonate with other members of the Congress of Iowa's delegation. But I did also want to spend just a brief minute flagging Representative Young. So if you're in the Des Moines area, he is your representative, and he is actually someone that is showing up on a lot of target lists for some of our national partners who are working on this. Both Blum and Young are in competitive elections, and so taking a vote on a bill like this is something that I think there's opportunity to work with both of these members of Congress on encouraging them to re-examine what these harsh work requirements and cuts to SNAP would mean for Iowa. So last but not least, our last member of the House for Iowa is Representative Dave Loebsack. He did vote to reauthorize the Farm Bill back in 2014 and in general is not supportive of work requirements or cuts to SNAP. And he also has really expressed a way to connect how we have these two main provisions of the Farm Bill, a lot of the ag provisions around crop insurance and subsidies, and then we have our Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, our SNAP. And he's really helped connect the dots between these two programs, recognizing that a lot of family farms operate on really slim margins. So droughts or other natural disasters that could set these farms kind of in an economic downward spiral could lead to those families needing temporary assistance from programs like SNAP. So that is what SNAP is supposed to be there. It's supposed to provide a safety net in times of need. So it's important that a farm bill that passes has adequate support for important programs like SNAP that family farmers as well as other Iowans can rely on in times of need. So now switching over to the Senate. Senator Grassley, he is a farmer himself, so he is a longtime supporter and champion of agriculture. But interestingly enough, he actually voted no on the 2014 Farm Bill. And that was because that Farm Bill did not include a provision that would close a loophole on who all is eligible to receive payments. Currently, there are opportunities for family members who aren't involved directly in the work or management of farm can still receive some of those farm subsidy payments, and he wants to eliminate that and close that loophole. And so he actually voted no last time because that loophole was not closed. So while that loophole pertains to something on the ag side that we're not focusing as much on, I think it's important to highlight because this reflects that Senator Grassley is willing to kind of put his stake in the sand, and if he thinks that the Farm Bill includes provisions that would be damaging to Iowa family farmers, he's willing to vote no on that. So that's an important message to flag with Senator Grassley. And then our other senator, Joni Ernst, she was also not in office in 2014, so she doesn't have a voting record on the Farm Bill, but she is our other member of the delegation who sits on the Committee of Jurisdiction. She is on the Senate Ag Committee, so she will be one of the first senators to be involved with the drafting of the Senate's version of the Farm Bill. She has, in general, had some support for work requirements and other things that we would view as damaging to SNAP, but you will see a quote that is from her back in March where she mentioned that she really does see that children in Iowa are food insecure and will be looking out for cuts to SNAP because she recognizes how that could be harmful to food insecure children in Iowa. So I think that's another opening for us to carry the message with her about how the very work requirements and cuts to SNAP in the current proposal really could harm families and children here in Iowa. So that's kind of where our delegation stands and what time frame we have. So what do we need? We've talked about what we don't like, but what do we want? We want a bipartisan farm bill. As Ann mentioned, the Farm Bill has a history of bipartisan support, and we think that's important to move forward, as opposed to the very partisan proposal coming out of the House. The vote was along party lines out of committee, only Republicans voting in favor of it and all Democrats voting against it. And we don't think that breaking from the traditional bipartisan history of the Farm Bill is the way to go. So we would like a bipartisan Farm Bill and a Farm Bill that strengthens, not cuts SNAP. As you heard at the beginning of the presentation, SNAP is a very important program, and so we want to see a bill that includes opportunities to strengthen this program, not cuts to it. So we are urging House members to vote no on this bill because it really breaks the long history of bipartisan commitment to ensure that families in Iowa have enough to eat. And I think it's also important to remember the need for a bipartisan bill because this bill coming out of the House also will need to get 60 votes in the Senate. So it needs to have support from both Republicans and Democrats to get it across the finish line. And I don't think we want to put the entire Farm Bill in jeopardy over partisan discussions on cuts to SNAP. That very thing happened back in 2014. The Farm Bill was delayed almost 2 years because discussions broke down over desires to cut SNAP. So that put families and farmers in Iowa in limbo for a long period of time. So we need a bipartisan Farm Bill that doesn't put the entire scope of the programs and services included in that bill at jeopardy. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Stephen. So he will talk about what you can do with all of this great information. Stephen?
All right, thanks, Mary Nell. For all of you who I have not met before, my name is Stephen Dykstra, and I'm the Communication Associate here at Child and Family Policy Center. And so, in my opinion, this is kind of the fun part. This is what we get to do, obviously within our organization, but also partners with you all, and talk about, what can we do here in the next coming days, weeks, and months to ensure that children in Iowa have access to food and nutritious food. So just a few things that we're going to go over quick. First of all, we're going to talk about messaging and what really goes into messaging and what, as an organization we think is really helpful in terms of messaging within the state of Iowa. And as always with any of this, feel free to take it with a grain of salt. We realize that, the people that we're talking to might be a little bit different than people you're trying to talk to, so feel free to tailor your messages in a way that makes sense, and we certainly encourage that. We're also going to talk about a social media toolkit that we put together specifically for SNAP. Again, these are visuals and sample posts that we put together. And as always, feel free to edit them, tailor them to your organization and to your messaging. That's ultimately why we're providing this, just because we want to be helpful and we see the value in it. And then finally, we're going to talk about how you can contact your member of Congress. There's a couple of exciting things coming up, including tomorrow, a national call-in day that, through our various partners, and we want to pass along to you guys. Basically, you can call in, and our goal is to swarm on both the Senate and the houses with calls coming from constituents and voicing our support for a bipartisan farm bill and one that does not include cuts of SNAP. So let's jump in and talk about messaging quick. As I'm sure many of you know, messaging is very important, and one thing to remember when you're tailoring your message is that you want to be very clear about what you're trying to communicate. SNAP can be somewhat complex, as Ann was sharing. There are various parts of it that quite frankly, a lot of people don't fully understand what's included in that. However, kind of our job as advocates is to kind of break that down in a way that's meaningful to our audiences so they can connect with it and then ultimately they can act. And that's something that we're trying to get across, and we also encourage you to do as well. So focus on what's important and limit the number of messages you put out there. We don't want to overload our audiences with messages, certainly not with conflicting messages, and kind of go from there. Like I said, this is all pretty basic stuff. I'm sure many of you have a lot of experience in this area, but we just wanted to reiterate because we think it's important. And like I said, be clear with your ask. Help your audiences know what you would like them to do and provide ways for them to do it. Basically, the easier you make it, unfortunately, the higher the chances that they'll actually act and come through. So, in our perspective and looking at all this, and, Mary and Nell kind of talked about this a little bit, but we think one of the most major themes in all of this is that we need a bipartisan farm bill. And, of course, there are, sub-messages that come off of that, but in hindsight, we really do need this bipartisan farm bill for many reasons, and we think that's the most important thing to push across. Now, as you can see under that, there are other things that we can talk about. First of all, we can talk about how work requirements can be harmful for, working adults in Iowa, but especially children. And I know for a lot of us here, we come at these things from the perspective of children. We're looking out for children, we're advocates for children and healthy child development. And one way we can present this is that, the current partisan farm bill that's kind of been proposed does hurt children and is not good for children, especially in Iowa. Another way, like I said, to frame it is say, hey, SNAP does help children. It helps families, and important component is it helps persons with disabilities. And so again, we need that bipartisan farm bill because there's a lot of people out there who are really impacted by this in a positive way. And finally, this is definitely a good way to go about it too. You're looking at the maps that Ann was sharing, and you can see that the SNAP program really does have a local, personal benefit, even by counties. I mean, you look at the amount of dollars that are going into these local economies. It's almost astronomical how much money, and it's very efficient. It goes straight to these vendors and these small businesses. And so, if you think that that's a good message and a good argument for your audiences, feel free to take it in that direction too. And so I hope that kind of provides a brief overview in terms of what we're thinking for messaging. And so we're going to move on to social media toolkit that we put together for you guys. And just as a reminder, we will be emailing this out to you all along with the recording from this presentation as well. Now, as you can see here, we put together some hashtags that we think are really core to what we're trying to say and what we're trying to communicate in terms of SNAP. You can see the second one from the bottom there, the hashtag #HandsOffSNAP. That actually comes from a greater nationwide campaign that is happening tomorrow, Tuesday, May 8th. It comes from Center for American Progress, among other kind of larger advocacy organizations. As you can see there, their specific message is they want us to really heighten the social media awareness starting at 11 a.m. Central Time tomorrow. Now, they do encourage us to use that hashtag whenever tomorrow, but again, the concept and the goal is to basically flood social media with this hashtag so people see it, and hopefully we can get it trending there too. So if that's something that you think would be helpful or something your organization could be a part of, feel free to take part in that. Otherwise, some of those other hashtags too, we think are central to what we're trying to communicate. And also just within that toolkit, we do have other components, which we will get into here very shortly. So, yeah, like I said, get into very shortly. We put together some visuals. Research shows that social posts with visuals are very much more well received than those without. And so whenever possible, we encourage people to use visuals, whether you want to come up with your own or you want to use the ones that we provide, whichever. But research does show that your post gets much more traction if you have a visual component to it. So in this toolkit, we will provide these visuals. We've included some there on the slide, along with some tips and sample posts. I also do want to note that when we send out the social media toolkit, the visuals will be provided in different formats. They will all be in the JPEG format, but they will be sized differently depending on the destination medium. So, for example, the visual is going to be tailored to Facebook, and the visual for Twitter is going to be sized differently. And we're also including some for Instagram for those of you who have Instagram accounts. So just be mindful of that. They're labeled clearly, and hopefully that will make it simple for you guys if you decide to use these. All right, so I'd like to transition into talking about how we can get directly involved. And obviously one of the best ways to do that is contacting your elected official. And so we put together, basic overview of communication. Try to see here. We include both senators and all 4 representatives, including their official website as well as their office locations, numbers, their Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram handles. So really, you can just go through there and figure out, what is the best way for me to contact this person, and hopefully that will make it easier for you guys as you kind of strategize and figure out what you want to do. We also included a script, just a mock-up script of what you can say if you do decide to call in and talk to your elected official. And as always, we encourage you guys to be positive. Talk about the things that you would like your representative or senator to do. And obviously personal stories are really helpful because it shows the tangible impact that, for example, SNAP would have, or, if SNAP were to be cut, how it would affect you in a personal way. And one other important thing to note is that make sure you're clear that you're a constituent. A lot of times they will be very wary of people who, are calling in and they're not sure if they're a constituent. So make sure you're clear you're a constituent, and if you do that, obviously you have more clout as an individual, and hopefully that's a good starting point for you guys. As I mentioned, we'll get to that in a second. Very briefly here, so for many of us, we're kind of from the Des Moines area, but for those of you who aren't in Representative Young's district, we still encourage you to check out this survey. So Representative David Young has put out this brief survey. The link is provided in the social media toolkit, so you can go in there and just click on that and fill it out. As you can see, he's basically trying to gauge where people are at in terms of work requirements. And he kind of lists a range of responses, and we are encouraging you guys as advocates and supporters of a robust SNAP system to go in and basically voice your opposition to SNAP work requirements. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to contact us. Again, the link is provided in the social media toolkit that we will be emailing out after this presentation. As I mentioned earlier, tomorrow, May 8th, is a National Call-In Day. This is put together by some of our key partners, And again, the whole purpose of this is to flood the House, flood the Senate with phone calls in support of a bipartisan farm bill and in support of a robust SNAP. And so you can see that 888 number there. You can call in tomorrow anytime and get connected with your representative or senator. And as I mentioned, this is a nationwide thing, so we hope to get a really good turnout there. So that's something tangible that you can do starting tomorrow. As always, let us know if you have any questions. And these slides will be provided in the email, so if you don't get the number right now, you can go back and look at it later too. And finally, and very briefly, I want to mention that we put together what we're calling a one-pager or a brief that covers SNAP as a whole in Iowa. It basically provides a snapshot of SNAP, no pun intended, of the program in Iowa, basically how it impacts Iowans, what are the strengths of it, as well as things that you can do to advocate. And that is located on our homepage at cfpciowa.org. If you go on there, it will be basically the first thing you see. Go ahead and you can click on that and print it off or email it or save it, share it, use it however you'd like. Again, we want to provide that as a resource for you all. And with that, I am done with my section. I'm going to hand it back over to Ann.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thanks to Marianelle before that. I'm grateful to you all for joining us as well. I think we'll close here in a minute, but I did want to give people one last chance to answer questions, and I do see one question from Charlie Bruner, our former executive director, and Charlie was asking about information on the number of people, kids, or persons with disabilities served by congressional district. And I'm not sure if I have a ready resource to all of those, but we can include when we send out the email. I know there's some data available on the website, the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities website, that does at least a little bit of that. So I will track down if there's a good link to put that to put that out. Oh, and we have another question coming in. Aside from administrative burden, are there other key arguments you suggest to bring up with Representative Young? And I'm going to let Marianelle think about that. I think as and I'll start, but Marianelle, please do to kick in. I think that the administrative burden, I do think the work issue is an issue to pose with him, because as Marianelle said, I think he tends to be supportive of that, but I think he's really fairly receptive to a discussion around how these work requirements may not get us the results that we want. I think the piece around the fact that there were those pilot projects that were included in the last Farm Bill, and that we'll know a lot more about what's effective ways to help folks on SNAP move into the workforce. I think that's a good salient point with him, and I think one that he may be receptive to. Marianelle, do you have any additional thoughts around that question?
I think your point about the pilot projects, let's wait and learn and see what best practices are, is an excellent one. I think playing to research and best practice and having data-informed decisions is something that resonates with Representative Young. And I would have to consult with our communications gurus about the best way to pitch this, but I think another angle with Representative Young is, I think everyone knows that this House bill is unlikely to pass through the Senate as is without significant changes. So why does the House continue to have to take these political contentious votes? Why go on record voting in support of something that, especially during an election year, could come back and be used against you? So I think also thinking about more of the kind of political game of why is the House the one that is always walking the plank, so to speak, as they did with the vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act last year, almost exactly a year ago. So I think talking to him about, do you think this bill is really going to pass the Senate as is? No? Well, then why do you have to kind of be the ones to go on record for that? That would be the only other thing that I would drive home, in addition to what Ann mentioned about the work requirements. And let's learn from the best practices that the pilot states are collecting right now. But great question.
It is a great question. One other thing, and I'm kind of looking at the list of folks we have on the line, but for anyone here who might have a membership base or represent organizations that are statewide, I think, Representative Young's district includes the Des Moines area, right? And I think he he flies into Des Moines. I think he hears a lot. Lots of his, constituents live in Des Moines. But his district also includes Council Bluffs and includes all of Southwest Iowa. I think him hearing from folks around his district about kind of personal impacts. I know there's been some other, opportunities and other issues to connect him with constituents who've, I think, really touched him on some issues. So I think this would be a really great opportunity, again, for groups that have that sort of membership base or member organizations to put some of those personal stories on this for him. That would be one other. And, of course, that's always good policy. That's always a good idea. But I think he's particularly open to those kinds of conversations.
I'm sorry, this is Mary Nell. I'm going to chime in with one more thought. And I did mention this a little bit during my earlier comments, but I think Representative Young has expressed concerns about how the Trump administration's proposed tariffs will impact the ag community in Iowa regarding soybeans and other products like that. So I think the Farm Bill is even more important. Getting a strong Farm Bill passed is even more important given the uncertainty about tariffs and the ag business at large. And so I think also reiterating the point that we can't risk a partisan Farm Bill getting stalled through negotiations over harmful cuts to SNAP. This is not the time to mess around. We need this bill passed and in a timely manner. So given all of the uncertainty that the state is currently facing, so I think that also reiterates the importance of having a bipartisan Farm Bill that we're sure can get across the finish line before the September 30th deadline.
Great. Thank you, Mary Nell. All right. Well, I see no further questions. I do really appreciate both those questions. They were great. And again, Stephen, I think will be following up with all of those materials that we talked about. And for folks who can join in tomorrow on that day of action would be terrific. As always, we're so grateful here at the Center for our partners and learn from you guys all the time. So love to have opportunities to share some of the stuff that we know as well. So anyway, keep on fighting the good fight, all of you, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. Have a good day. Thanks.